Good morning to everybody. How you doing? Hope all's well. Keep up the beautiful work. Be'ezrat Hashem yitbarach v'yitromam b'sorot tovot yishuot v'nehamot. Today's class is dedicated that our hostages should come home. I know the other day was 613, and 613 is a good number, but not for something like this. We want to have 613 that the hostages could do all 613 mitzvot home with us, and the hostages, please Hashem. And as we always say, the Mashiach should come, Be'ezrat Hashem. We know that we should live and be well, but after 180 years old, when we go up, one of the things they ask us is, did you hope for the Mashiach every single day? Guess what? I think that's a no-brainer. If anyone watches the news, you can't help but hope for the Mashiach every day, and it should come soon in merit of everyone's learning and unity and good things always. Yesterday, we were learning the laws of Tochen, of Tahina, of grinding items for on Shabbat for eating, are not only for eating, for other purposes as well. For example, making snuff, as we said yesterday, certain kind ways it's possible, certain ways no. But long story short, most people are just grinding for food purposes. We also said you can't sand wood if someone's interested in the sawdust that comes off. Now, of course, even if you're not interested in sawdust, it's a sin for other purposes. But for now, we're discussing the laws of grinding. And we spoke about salt shaker and peppercorns. Corns and grinding in that fashion. We said it's not allowed. Those two machines are not allowed. If you have to, you could take a back of a knife and crush the items on a plate or something of the like. Then we said certain things are allowed only if you're going to eat it right away. And right away doesn't mean that second. Right away means a half hour before the meal or while you're in the middle of the meal if it's for that meal. We said cutting vegetables for, let's say, an Israeli salad, and you want to cut them tiny. The rule is that if you're doing it for a meal right away, you're allowed to. But if you're doing it for later on Shabbat, believe it or not, it's a sin from the Torah, which is pretty interesting, because usually when you have something that's prohibited from the Torah, where the rabbis won't really let you do it in a simple circumstance. Like, if you could do it if you're going to eat it right away, but if you're going to push it off, it's technically a sin from the Torah. That's pretty powerful. So we got to be very careful with these items. Somebody might say, hey, I saw my mother cutting the vegetables tiny, I could do it as well. And my father, my mother know the laws, so I'll do it, and they might do it for a later meal. Now, of course, if someone does it by mistake, it's not a sin from the Torah as severe as if someone does it on purpose. But there is a saying out there: if somebody makes a Yui and a cop pulls them over, or if you breathe on Norwood Avenue next Friday and they pull you over and you say, well, I didn't know I can't breathe, they're going to tell you not knowing is not an excuse for the law. So now the rabbi gets into the subject. Let's say somebody has a pet in their home. Some people have iguanas, some people have monkeys, some people have kids that act like monkeys, but that's only in Wisconsin. We don't know about those items. But long story short, are you allowed, let's say somebody has a turtle or something, and by the way, it's always going to be for later on. There's no right away for a turtle. But if someone has an animal, are you allowed to, let's say, cut vegetables tiny for that animal? You have whatever it might be, a hamster, a dog, a cat, or chickens or birds or something of the like. Are you allowed to? Do we consider an animal that you own condition enough that you're allowed to cut for them and do this item, or it has to be for human beings? Believe it or not, on the holiday, when we said you're allowed to cook on the holiday, we also said that you can, if someone that's not part of your family or someone not from our nation comes, it's not so simple you could cook. But of course, for peace purposes, things are allowed. But for animals, technically, you're not allowed to unless that's the only thing that they eat. Because when you have an animal, it's incumbent on you to feed them even before you eat, like it says in the Shema, and like we spoke about many times. V'achata v'savata, right? And then ulubehemtecha v'achata v'savata. It says, give your animal and then you shall eat. So it's sar ba'alei hayim if a person eats and the dog is watching and they didn't give the dog to eat. Now, if that's like that with an animal, how much more so for a human being? And I told you a million times already how Batya never sat down before he made sure to eat, before he made sure the Khadameh had what to eat as well. Because if you have to care about an animal, how much more so a human being? So are you allowed to cut vegetables for the animal that you have, tiny whiny? And the answer is yes, you are allowed to. The rabbi also says even meat, if it's not edible when it's a big piece and you want to cut it up tiny and dice it up, even though it doesn't come from the ground, so it's not a concept of really tochen, of grinding on Shabbat. However, it is a problem maybe of preparing. It wasn't edible before. Now it's edible. Are you allowed to do that for an animal in the house? And the answer is yes. Now, if you are listening, make sure you listen to the next couple of minutes because all this applies only to domestic animals, domesticated animals that we have in our homes, etc., as a pet. So the rabbi says you could cut vegetables, teeny, etc. However, on Shabbat or the holiday for other purposes, you're not allowed to put food in front of, not even cutting it tiny. Just take out a piece of bread from your house, put it outside for the pigeons on Shabbat. Problem. If it's birds in your house, then of course you can feed them. You have to feed them. And are you allowed to take bread and make it into little pieces? Yes. Is that a problem of tochen, grinding? The answer is no. Why? Because first of all, like we said, if it's for right away, you're allowed to. But second of all, bread is already ground, so technically you could even do it for later on. Forget about right away. Vegetables are only right away, but bread, it was already ground. It can't be bread if it wasn't ground. It grew as wheat, then it was ground, and then you made the bread. So now back to our subject. You cannot put bread outside for the birds, for the cats. There are these people in every neighborhood that they feel like they have to be the ones to feed the cats. So you wake up in the morning and you see 90 spots on your property of all these kitty foods that they have. Meow, 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 meow. On the item, right? You're not allowed to feed cats that belong to the public that are out there, wild cats, stray cats. You're not allowed to feed them on Shabbat. How come? It's not only cats, it's all animals. However, dogs are different, as we'll get to momentarily. There is another halacha on Shabbat that you're not allowed to capture. You're not allowed to trap animals on Shabbat. Tzeda, are you allowed to, if there's a bee on the table, can you put a cup over it? So technically not, but if someone's allergic or someone's scared that they're gonna get bitten, those laws are different. But a person for sure can't capture an animal on Shabbat because it was one of the 39 melachot. They captured animals for the skins, for the utensils, and for the material that was outside of the Mishkan. So trapping is one of the 39 melachot. That's why we have to be careful. So because trapping is a problem, so too is feeding them because that's the pregame show of luring them in. So you're not allowed to feed public animals or even fish on if someone has a pond near his house and they want to throw bread on Shabbat, technically you're not allowed to. And for the people on Ocean Parkway that take a whole bread bakery and dump it on the street, and right, and the birds only eat one tiny kizayid, and the rest goes to waste and gets disrespected. That's also a problem. People don't want to throw out bread, but when they put it like that, it's maybe worse to put it there than it is in the garbage. People step on it, and it gets ma'uz, it gets grotesque. So therefore, we have to use common sense before we do these kind of things. But anyway, like we said, you cannot feed animals or birds of the public. However, the rabbi tells us if you want to give milk to the cats that are in your neighborhood, maybe see it on Shabbat and the holiday. Technically, just Shabbat is much worse than the holiday because the holiday you're allowed to do it to capture food. Just the rabbis came along and said you're not allowed to. But on Shabbat, you're not allowed to for sure. And a dog is different. Why is a dog different? The answer is if there's a stray dog, be careful, of course, but you're allowed to feed it on Shabbat. The reason for that is the dog depends on human beings for food, and we have to have more mercy on them, believe it or not. And it overrides this concept of not feeding public animals that are on Shabbat. But however, of course, every other animal they're able to fetch for themselves. And therefore, dogs, you're allowed to, other animals no. But if you have animals in your house, as mentioned, of course, you have to feed them on Shabbat. What do they do in the zoo in Israel? They have the Gana Chayot Hatanachi. That's also, even though we don't consider that wild stray animals, it belongs to the government. It belongs to, it's owned by. So the feeding is incumbent on us. And therefore, I'm sure they have workers. I'm sure it's Shomer Shabbat that feed the animals in these items. Also, kibbutzim, you have to feed the animals. You have people who own horses that they have to feed them on Shabbat as well. I once was staying in a certain place where a guy had a whole farm and he's a religious fellow, yeshiva guy. So he's walking home in his hat and his suit and his tie. And then all of a sudden you see him going to throw hay in front of the horses. It was a pretty funny sight to see. But anyway, like we said, if you own them, then you have to feed them before you eat. It's a commandment from the Torah. And if you have an aquarium in the house, a fish bowl, you have to feed your fish as well. Are you allowed to add water to an aquarium on Shabbat? And the rabbi tells us, yes, you are allowed to. Believe it or not, Hamabadia, as we know, when it came to himself, he was very strict, even though for others, he was very lenient. That's the way a person should be. And people far away in Never Neverland, they're strict for others and they're lenient for themselves. How you doing? Unfortunately, but the right way to be is strict for yourself and lenient for others. So Hamadia was very strict for himself, and in his home years ago, he wouldn't let a fish tank. Why? Because he was afraid that he's going to eat before he feeds the fish, and he doesn't want to desecrate this concept. Now, some will say that's not really an animal. You have a cat, you have a dog, is one thing, an iguana, but to have fish. But the rabbi even had it with a fish tank. And as soon as a fish tank came out with an automatic feeder, then the rabbi got one in his home because he didn't have to worry about the concept of feeding the fish before he himself ate. It wasn't like Hamadia ate that much anyway. We mentioned in Parashat B'Shalach a bunch of months ago already. Time flies when you're having fun, and it should be with beracha. But in the Parashat B'Shalach, when Am Yisrael got the man from heaven, the parasha where the sea split, we know the man fell, and we people read Parashat B'Shalach, they read it Shnai Mikra Hatagum in that week's on a Tuesday, whatever it is, but there's a custom that's brought down, an ancient custom, that if you to put bread outside or wheat kernels for the birds. It's a whole story that happened in with the man. We know some people, Datan and Aviram, try to make Moshe look bad that the man did fall. So he wanted to make the man didn't fall on Shabbat. They wanted to show that it did, but Hashem sent the birds to eat it all up before they did what they were planning to do. So to show appreciation to the birds, believe it or not, we put bread or wheat outside for the birds in Parashat B'Shalach? What if someone forgot to do it on Friday? Are you allowed to do it on Shabbat itself? And the answer is, survey says yes. Yes says it's such a fabulous, beautiful custom that, believe it or not, you can and should do it even on Shabbat, even though we said no feeding public wild animals that are out there or birds or the like. But he said, since this Mustamin Hag is so beautiful, you are allowed to do it on Shabbat, Shabbat Shirah, Parashat B'Shalach. We'll stop here for today. Hope everyone has the greatest day. Keep up the excellent work. Good things always. Besorot Tobot, Yeshua v'Nehamot. All the best. Bye.